very short or non-existent conference. We're back with our session on placemaking materiality. So we are going to start with the first speaker who doesn't need any elaborate introduction. So please welcome Jörg Meibauer.
Okay, my topic is fictional cities between utopia and dystopia. And I will start with the observation that in picture theory, the distinction between descriptive or informational and narrative picture books is widely acclaimed. By and large, we may correlate description with factuality and narration with fictionality, though there are different kinds of hybridity, that is, descriptive picture books that contain narrative elements and narrative picture books that contain factual elements. In what follows, I will explore the relation between factuality and fictionality regarding the representation of cities in picture books. To this end, I will apply two distinctions, namely the distinction between factual and fictional pictures on the one hand, and the distinction between realistic and non-realistic artistic style on the other hand. Let us look at these distinctions in turn. First, we have factual pictures of cities, that is, pictures that are related to an identifiable existing city such as Hamburg, London, or Venice. This type of picture can be found, for instance, in the Großstadtbilderbuch by Sophus Hansen that depicts Hamburg and its Wilhelminian architecture as the habitat of children. In this category belongs also, for instance, This is London by Miroslav Zizek. However, the artistic styles used in these books differ. While the latter uses a non-realistic, cartoonish style, the former uses a realistic style. By and large, realistic styles make the identification and recognition of an existing real city easier. Second, we have fictional pictures of cities. We may say that these pictures are related to a non-identifiable, non-existing city. A case in point is Waterfall City, as depicted in Utopia, A Land Apart of Time by James Gurney. This book uses the artistic style of realism and is accordingly dubbed imaginative realism by James Gurney. In addition, we may put into this category: Hier fällt ein Haus, dort steht ein Kran und ewig droht der Baggerzahn, oder die Veränderung der Stadt. That means here a house falls, there a crane stands, and the digger's tooth is eternally threatening, or the change of the city by Swiss artist Jörg Müller. A book that creates a fictional city and its change with photorealistic means. To this, we can add the category of a fictional city in a non-realistic style, namely The Arrival by Shontan, which displays a sort of surrealism. What I want to argue for is that all of these representations of fictional cities necessarily bear some relation to the depiction of factual cities, although these relations may be of a rather complex nature. The initial taxonomy so far is rendered in the following table. Okay, so let's start with my first example. Literature for children. It is the first part of a series of 4 picture books, The Autonomous Island and Its Culture. Utopian literature is intended to convey a picture of a possible ideal world. In Utopia, A Land Apart from Time, it is reported that such a world actually existed or may even still exist. The indirect evidence is a sketchbook of the naturalist Arthur Dennison, which the author James Gurney claims to have discovered in the university library. The journal begins with the first entry on November 10th, 1862, and reports on the geography, nature, culture of the island of Dinotopia. The amazing thing is that in this world, dinosaurs and humans are friendly and respect each other. They can even communicate with each other, and in this way are capable of guiding the destiny of the utopian community in a cooperative manner. On the journey, the protagonist Arthur Dennison and his son Will are treated to the breathtaking panorama of Waterfall City, which is entirely surrounded by huge waterfalls. From a slightly elevated vantage point, you can see the fortified city. In the background, a mountain range is shown, while in the foreground, you can see the waterfalls framed by a scenery of rocks that form a darker frame against which the water masses stand out. Waterfall City is reached by the aircraft shown in the foreground. To study real waterfalls, we learn from James Gurney's Afterword to Dinotopia, the World Beneath from 2012. He traveled to Niagara Falls. The reader's curiosity to know what it looks like inside the city is satisfied by an urban interior showing the old bridge spanning the Playa Sora Canal. The diarist comments, we have wandered past canals and fountains, monuments and schools, gardens and observatories, kiosks and theaters, all woven into a watery labyrinth of stone that would shame even Venice. One could also say that the real Venice, or the famous Vedute of Venice by Antonio Canal or Bernardo Belletto, they have both the epithet Canaletto, influences these pictures of Waterfall City. And in fact, James Gurney went to Italy to study the originals. Thank you. The panorama picture of Waterfall City in Dinotopia, a world apart from time, has a counterpart in Dinotopia, Journey to Chandara from 2007. Here, Waterfall City is shown in the context of the sun's rays breaking through the blanket of rain clouds. The perspective is similar to the first panoramic image of Waterfall City, but the color palette is completely different, as the second panoramic image emphasizes the play of light and shadow with its bluish colors. These two panoramas are complemented by two map-like images. Information about Waterfall City major buildings and traffic routes can be obtained from a drawing of the city that roughly captures the viewer's point of view of the Waterfall City panorama, but includes the slightly elevated perspective of an approaching skybax. This is dinosaur. As with a map, irrelevant parts of the surroundings have been omitted, while the designations for buildings and traffic routes are printed. However, there are no other markings that are typical for maps. Contrast this with a map of Waterfall City drawn by Arthur Dennison in 1868 that highlights the locations of principal interest. This map is marked as historic by its yellowish color and distinct tiers. A legend in the upper left margin preserves the numbered 16 designations of relevant locations, and the numbers can be assigned to places on the map. It fulfills no particular function in the narration, but it allows the readers to get information about the structure of Waterfall City and to orientate themselves in those pictures that show urban interiors of the city. If one includes a panoramic image of Waterfall City in its two variants in the consideration, an increasing abstraction emerges, from the vivid, detailed panorama in the style of Veduta painting to the map-like overview to a typical ancient map. Note that there is an ancestral connection between drawings that spring from the architectural imagination and the design of utopian cities or ideal cities. Some designs were never realized, but other formerly utopian designs were actually realized, though perhaps not always exactly the form that utopian architects had in mind. Inspiration for the design of ideal cities came from Thomas More's Utopia, Tommaso Campanella, Sunshine State, and Leon Battista Alberti, 10 books on the art of building. Descriptions of such ideal cities must not simply capture sober facts. They must also inspire a desire for the realization of these cities. Furthermore, plans or pictures should support the idea of the ideal city. The art of James Gurney can be seen as a contribution to this utopian discourse. Now, my second example, fictional city and the change of factual cities, in this book that I abbreviate with Hier fällt ein Haus. We find a particular method of producing images of a fictional city in Hier fällt ein Haus, by the Swiss artist Jörg Müller, insofar his drawings are reconstructed from photographs of factual cities. And I go in this procedure of producing the pictures in this recent paper of mine. This portfolio is a critical examination of the rapid transformation of the urban environments, driven more by the capitalism of post-war society than by a desire to shape the city according to the needs of its inhabitants. In particular, the impact of greed for the better exploitation of land in the inner city, but also the rapid development of transport in the motorized society drive the transformation of the city, which gives a rise to a sense of sadness, but also anger. The change of fictional city named Albstadt is depicted in 8 large format folded tableaus contained in a folder that correspond to temporal states between 1953 and 1976. This temporal anchoring suggests historical factuality. So this is the first picture tableau from this collection, and this is the last tableau, and you can imagine that there are different states of change of the city in between. With respect to Jörg Müller's work, we can summarize that the impression of a dense description of the changing ordinary city is due to the use of a special artistic method, that is, the reduction of the documentary effects of photographs by drawings, leading to a reduction of complexity and pictorial information. Thus, while James Gurney's fictionality is constructed out of subjective visual impressions of existing places and the great archive of art history, Jörg Müller attempts to connect even more strongly to existing cities and their photographic documentation. Both have in common that they work on the architectural imagination, the one in utopian terms, the other in time-critical terms. So I come to my last example, fictional city and mental imagination, and consider The Arrival by Chantal. The Arrival is a textless picture book with black and white drawings, which is aimed at all ages. Its layout makes it reminiscent of an old photo album, thus suggesting a nostalgic frame. The challenge for the viewer is to reconstruct the story being told from the sequence of individual images, which are found in different configurations on the pages. It tells the story of a man who immigrates alone to escape a threat. He intends to have his wife and daughter join him later. Arriving at his destination by ship, he is examined before arriving in a large city. Finding a place to stay and work is difficult. Above all, the foreign language prevents communication, so the man has to rely on drawings and gestures. An animal becomes his friend, and he meets other immigrants who help him along. So he can finally bring his relatives to him and start a new life with them. The non-realistic artistic process is especially evident in the fact that impossible pictorial content occurs. This can be demonstrated in the pictures that show a cityscape. Here, the impression of a fantastic or surrealistic pictorial art arises. The first double spread with the panorama of a big city shows a group of immigrants on board of a ship waiting for its landing. The silhouette of the city reminds the viewer of the silhouette of Manhattan. On the right side, two huge figures shake hands. They characterized by their long robes, their hats, their animals, and some things they carry with them: suitcase, cup, bowl, bottle, pot, and kettle. They stand on or behind boats that have no further details. Obviously, these figures have a symbolic content. They seem to symbolize the universal idea of friendly, unprejudiced encounters between strangers. But how does one know that this is a figurative allusion to the factual city of New York? There are several possibilities here. First, the knowledge that New York was a destination for immigrants from all over the world in the past. Second, the visual comparison with photographs, drawings, and paintings that show the panorama of Manhattan. Note, however, that this panorama is not an exact rendition of the Manhattan silhouette. Third, the context of the book, in which a picture of the famous arrival hall at Ellis Island is shown. In his artist's note at the end of the book, Chantal explicitly refers to historical photographs of this arrival hall that inspired him. The surrealistic character of this fictional landscape is also evident in the following two images, which I unfortunately cannot comment on due to lack of time. Yeah, you can deeply go into these pictures and explain themselves. But this takes, of course, times. Okay. This is another, this is the city picture. So it's always an interesting idea to show a picture of a cityscape from the outside first, and then to go from the inside the city. Oh, no. That's okay. The point of this visual language is to make it visually tangible what impression such a foreign, overwhelming city might make on a helpless immigrant. The mental imagination of the immigrant is something that must be interpreted by the viewers and thus stimulates their own mental imagination. The viewers have to rely on their experience of the world, but they are not guided by a verbal text. Okay, I come to my conclusions. First, the distinction between realistic and non-realistic depictions seems to be justified on this small basis, of course. And the Dinotopia, Land Apart from Time, and Hirfeld and House both use a realistic illustration style, while The Arrival is non-realistic, but is fantastic, surrealistic. Second, although the books show fictional cityscapes, there is an indirect reference to factual cities. These are in Dinotopia, Venice, in Hirfeld and House, those cities that serve as a visual basis for the construction of Albstadt. And in The Arrival, it is Manhattan. However, the authors of the images take pains not to commit themselves too clearly. They insist on fictionality. At the same time, they make no secret of the factual sources that inspired them. The construction of the fictional urban landscapes is always accompanied by a dimension of evaluation. In Dinotopia, it is about the utopia of a peaceful community of animals and humans. Hirfeld and House draws attention to the dystopia of the faceless city, subject only to exploitation and thus inhumane. In The Arrival, negative evaluations are juxtaposed with positive evaluations. And finally, all books have a temporal dimension that go hand in hand with triggering a feeling of nostalgia. In Dinotopia, a temporal link is established between the year 1992, when the narrator discovered the diary, and the year 1868, which reports of the realm of Dinotopia that has fallen out of factual time by preserving much older structures. In Hirfeld and House, the change of the city is directly documented as a change in time, specifically the period between 1953 and 1973. Many viewers, it is assumed, prefer the older conditions of the city. In The Arrival, the time narrated is that of immigration with departure, journey, and arrival. The old-fashioned cover and the antique page layout of The Arrival signal that this immigration story is already a thing of the past. Thank you for your attention.